Well, welcome to It's an Inside Job BiteSize Fridays, your weekly dose of resilience, optimism, and well-being to get you ready for the weekend. Now, each week, I'll bring you insightful tips and uplifting stories to help you navigate life's challenges and embrace a more positive mindset. And so with that said, let's slip into the stream. Today, we're going to drop back into the archives and bring you a powerful conversation from Season 3, Episode 9, featuring the renowned neuroscientist and author, Ian Robertson. In this bite-sized episode, Ian sheds light on the crucial role of neuroadrenaline in our stress response and cognitive performance. He introduces us to the concept of the sweet spot of noradrenaline, where finding the right balance is essential for clear thinking and effective stress management. He also emphasizes that stress is all about perception, and by shifting how we view it, well, we can turn it into a driving force that propels us forward. In this short clip, it also delves into the critical role of self-confidence in navigating stress. Ian breaks down confidence into two key self-beliefs: can do and can happen. Now, these beliefs are just abstract ideas. They have a direct impact on our actions and outcomes, helping us move from apathy and frustration to positive, decisive action. Well, enough said. Let's slip into the stream into this bite-sized episode.
In a culture where we tend to medicalize our emotional conditions, people were kind of frightened of their anxiety, so there was fear of fear. And that made the noradrenaline levels even higher. So you get this negative cycle. So it was actually started off with my study of attention, because I do think attention is critical to stress, because basically stress arises from a perception that the demands made on you exceed your ability to cope with them. A perception consists of thoughts and images, and thoughts and images are changeable and replaceable, and you can learn learnable. And so it should be possible, if people properly understand what's going on in their brains and their bodies, to actually learn to navigate it, and even better, to use that stress. And so I guess the theme of the book was stress is something, is a perception. The energy that comes from that perception can actually be harnessed for good. And great sportsmen like and women, and Tiger Woods said, "The day I'm not nervous when I go into the course is the day I give up." And
that's a great quote.
All great sportsmen and women are masters of their own minds. They understand how to harness this stuff that many people call stress or anxiety.
I think the word stress in itself has taken on a negative connotation, but what I hear you speaking to, Ian, is that stress, depending upon how we see it, well, we have two other English words. I'm based in Norway, so just to sort of parse the English here, is that you have distress, which is more of a negative form of stress, and then you have eustress, which you speak about, where Tiger Woods takes that stress and uses it to optimize his performance or his thinking, his mindset. Is that what I understand you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. And you know, the thing is, you know, I was once at home on a Saturday afternoon, and suddenly my heart started to pound, and my skin was sweaty, and my mouth was dry, and my stomach was tight. So if I asked someone what emotion I was having, they'd probably say anxiety or fear. And I'd say, no. Scotland had just beat England at rugby. So I say to you, well, how come one emotion, so different, excitement, can have exactly the same symptoms as another emotion, anxiety? And the answer is that these are simply symptoms of arousal of the body and brain preparing for action. And it doesn't care what that action is, whether it's running away or celebrating. And so it only becomes a particular emotion by the words we put on that, by the context. And we have the power to change these words and to change that context.
I think that was remarkable, because what I hear you saying is that whether it's anxiety or whether it's excitement, how we define it, they have the same physiological markers, but what tells the difference is the narrative, the story we're telling ourselves about the context. And we have the power to shift or redefine the meaning we're giving to the situation, to reattribute it to something more positive or constructive for yourself. Is that what I understand you're saying, Ian?
Yes, precisely. And there's another emotion that has very similar profile, and that is anger. And there's a lot of anger about these days. And, as I think it was Socrates said, anger is a very dangerous emotion. So some people say it burns the vessel clean. It's a cleansing emotion. Mark Twain said it does more damage to the vessel holding it. And so who's right? Well, Socrates suggested that anger is great, but it has to be directed at a specific person or group with a specific request of that group. And so that you know what you're angry about, and because anger is essentially a negotiation tool. So non-specific anger, feeling angry about injustice generally or about what your life's course generally, is a very dangerous emotion because the symptoms are identical to those of anxiety. So what you're doing is you're doubling your distress. When you're angry, you're anxious, and simultaneously, when you're anxious, you're angry. And the evidence is that people who've been in accidents, their traumatic stress gets worse over time if they feel angry in an untargeted way about the cause of their injury.
And that's one of the interesting things I found. A book, again, the book that I bought is dog-eared and underlined. One of the things is you described that you articulate anger in versus anger out, where anger in is where we kind of suppress and hold it in, and anger out is directed. Could you explain the difference, how one is healthier than the other?
So anger is an energizing emotion. Mm-hmm. So whereas anxiety tends to make you pull back and avoid, anger is designed to help you take action to change a situation. But essentially, anger is an interpersonal tool to strengthen your hand in negotiation. So if you look at two dogs growl at each other, and they growl much more than they ever fight. And it's the one that growls the deepest and the hardest that generally results in the other dog slinking off, tail between his legs. Well, anger is a bit like that. It's a negotiation tool between people. But if you feel that the world is unfair, or that your lot in life is unfair, that sense of injustice tends to make you feel angry. But that is an impotent anger, because you don't have a particular person or group of people of whom you're making a specific demand to do X or Y, or not do X or Y. So if you can channel anger in that way, so to a specific movement or a specific set of actions, then it is something that kind of makes you feel very good because it has energized you to take action. So the critical thing here is action. It is very difficult to know what action to take if the anger is general and non-specific. And then so you feel angry. What happens then? It all gets, because the emotions only exist as a context we place on them, you don't know whether you're feeling angry or anxious. And that doubles the length of time, even more than doubles the length of time when you're feeling in an unpleasant state. Whereas if you know that I want that neighbor not to be using his leaf blower
at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning.
9 o'clock, yeah. You have a specific action, and the question is not to make that request in an angry way, but in an instrumental way that's going to get the goal that you want achieved.
Direct and diplomatic. That's what I hear you're saying. Because I think that's really interesting what you're saying, where anger in is kind of, it's intangible, it's abstract, it just floats around, where anger out is directed action towards something, where I take a sense of control and certainty. I'm dealing with the situation, and that can move me from distress to eustress, as I understand, or positive stress.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, eustress is a nice concept, but it kind of, I mean, stress. Yes, stress is a perception. The emotion, the underlying physiology is a general arousal and preparation for action, and that action can be avoiding and pulling back, attacking, or celebrating. And it's a question of realizing that you have the capacity to relabel that arousal in a positive way or a negative way or a neutral way indeed.
And what I found also very interesting with your book is how you talked about the differentiation between the hemispheres. Because what also resonated with me, Ian, I don't know if you're familiar with another neuroscientist, Jill Bolte Taylor. She wrote a book where her left hemisphere was completely knocked out. And when I read that...
Brilliant book.
Yes. And I read a lot of connections. And so as I understood from what you've articulated in your book, the left hemisphere is about approach, where the neurons or the brain cells are wired in that hemisphere for approach. It's about taking action. It's goal-oriented. But it's the ability for it to parse and see the difference between things, the ability to categorize and to prioritize, where the right, as I understand it, is more towards avoidance. Now, avoidance is not always a negative thing to withdraw or to shrink back, but as you said, it's also about self-awareness, it's about creativity, it's about self-reflection. And so you have the left and the right. And as I understand from your book, is when we are in a distress or negative stress, or we've given the arousal given it a negative connotation, that we withdraw, and that draws up anxiety or anger or frustration, whatever it is. Is it also because there's an imbalance in the hemispheres, and part of being more reflected is to equally activate those hemispheres, so you have the right and the left, I'm stretching it.
Yes.
But is that what I understand?
No, there is evidence to support that, Jason. That because the two hemispheres are in competition with each other, so they're mutually inhibitory. And in a healthy state, the evidence is that most of us are slightly more inclined to the approach system. So there's a slight imbalance, particularly in men, in favor of approach, which leads to a certain overconfidence, a likelihood to take action, and a slight rosy over-optimism. That's the source of all the vast profits of the online gambling industry. But it's a kind of health. It's not an unhealthy. It's a kind of healthy, slight imbalance. But there's still the right hemisphere, particularly the right frontal lobe, is still capable of self-monitoring. It's still capable of empathy. It's still capable of perceiving risk. So it's only a slight imbalance. But if a person becomes hooked on an appetitive stimulus like power or money or sex or cocaine, then you get, or gambling, you get this increasing dominance of the left hemisphere approach systems, which tends to inhibit the right hemisphere empathic, self-awareness, risk sensitive systems of the brain, and that leads to all sorts of disasters. And vice versa, if someone gets stuck in an avoidant mode, painful self-awareness, everyone's looking at me, painful exaggeration of the bad things that are going to happen in the future, memory system biased towards remembering past failures, difficult even to remember past successes, they don't come to mind, painfully aware of the one person frowning at them, ignoring the 100 people that are either smiling at them or not paying any attention to them. So this whole biasing of the system that causes this retreat, and that, of course, inhibits the left hemisphere approach system, so that person becomes paralyzed. It becomes a huge challenge to take any action, to do anything.
If you want more, why not go back and listen to the original full conversation with my guest? You will find the link in the episode in the show notes. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. And I'll be back next week with my long-form conversational episodes on Monday and the latest BiteSize episode on Friday. And have yourself a relaxing and rejuvenating weekend.